Welcome to Mystical Story Addiction. In today's video, we will explore the story, The Holy Maiden of the Demonic Sect Support. At its core, this is a tale about the transformation of a relationship, from a mutually beneficial alliance into a sincere and profound love between Lu Chen and Bingyao. Each chapter is filled with intense and gripping moments, from strategic mind games with Lan Ruoshui, to fierce battles of strength against powerful enemies, and to tender, heartfelt scenes shared by the two main characters. The story also portrays Bingyao's journey, from a suppressed supporting character into an independent powerhouse, with Lu Chen always by her side, supporting and loving her unconditionally. Chapter 1. Transforming into a book and becoming canon fog. Part 1. A nameless death and the moment fate derails. That night was nothing out of the ordinary. No rain, no wind, no sign whatsoever that it would become the final moment of a man's life. Lu Chen sat alone in his shabby rented room. The fluorescent light above flickered weakly, like a breath on the verge of fading. The cooling fan of his laptop hummed steadily, dry, monotonous, and weary. On the screen were lines of text he had read countless times before, a fantasy novel that once left him both frustrated and bored, yet somehow impossible to put down. In that story, there was a name that appeared early and disappeared just as quickly, so quickly that no one even cared to remember it: Lu Chen. An insignificant side character. A fallen young master from a declining family. Publicly humiliated after having his engagement broken off. Reduced to a laughingstock. And then, he died quietly, at the hands of a righteous disciple. That was it. No glory, no tragedy, no one mourning his fate, just a cold, indifferent line that marked the end of his existence. When he first read that part, Lu Chen had only sneered, thinking that this was exactly the kind of canon fodder character born solely to highlight someone else's brilliance. What he never expected was that just a few minutes later, that very name would become his own. The first sensation when death struck was not overwhelming pain, but emptiness. It felt as if something invisible had clenched his heart, draining the air from his lungs, causing every surrounding sound to vanish in an instant. His vision darkened, and his consciousness plunged into a bottomless abyss. There was no light at the end of a tunnel, no replay of a lifetime, only an endless stretch of cold, hollow nothingness. When sensation finally returned, what greeted Lu Chen was not his familiar room, but a dull, aching pain spreading throughout his body, from his spine to his limbs, like a body that had just been violently thrown down and then reluctantly pulled back up. His breathing was heavy, his throat parched, and every inhale came with a burning sting. It took him a long time to open his eyes, and when his heavy eyelids finally parted, what he saw was pale sunlight filtering through wooden window bars, casting faint rays onto the cold stone floor. The air carried the scent of medicinal herbs, aged wood, and an unfamiliar atmosphere so foreign that it made his heart sink. The room was spacious yet empty. The ceiling was high, supported by dark wooden beams, and a few faded ink paintings hung on the walls, worn by time. There was no trace of the modern world, no electronics, nothing that belonged to his former life. Just as Lu Chen was still trying to comprehend what had happened, a sudden, intense pain erupted in his head. Countless images and memories that did not belong to him flooded into his mind. Names, identity, past events, fragmented pieces of memory forced together, as if trying to reconstruct a life that was never his, making his head feel like it was about to explode. Lu Chen gripped the edge of the bed tightly, his nails digging deep into the wood, cold sweat soaking through his clothes. He saw a once glorious family that had fallen into decline. He saw a young master who was looked down upon, suppressed, with mediocre talent for cultivation, barely surviving under the shadow of a collateral branch. And above all, he saw an ending that had already been written. Lu Chen, the young master of the Lu family, a canon fodder character in Heavenly Tao Goddess. At that moment, his heart pounded so violently it felt as though it might shatter his ribcage. There was no need for further proof, every detail aligned with terrifying precision. This world, this body, this fate, all of it was part of the novel he had once read. He hadn't transmigrated into the male protagonist favored by the Heavenly Tao, nor into a brilliant genius destined to shine. He had become someone who would soon be discarded. Scenes from the story surfaced vividly in his mind: the humiliating annulment of his engagement, the scornful gazes of the so-called righteous faction, the cold laughter echoing through the grand hall, and not long after, a death so insignificant that no one even mentioned it. A chill crept down his spine. And yet, strangely, Lu Chen did not panic. Instead, he felt clearer than ever before. Clear that if he followed the original path, he would undoubtedly die. Clear that the Heavenly Tao was not on his side. But at that very moment, another thought slowly took shape, calm, rational, and frighteningly cold. If he already knew the plot, if he already knew every step of fate, then perhaps what was predetermined was not truly unchangeable. Lu Chen's gaze gradually deepened. He understood this world all too well. The weak had no right to choose. But those who understood the rules could always find a crack within them. If he wanted to live, he could not stand with the hypocritical so-called righteous path, nor could he rely on anyone's mercy. In the original story, there was only one person strong enough, clear-headed enough, and ruthless enough to disrupt the entire situation, even though she was ultimately driven to her death. A name surfaced in his mind, cold as frost, slowing even his thoughts for a heartbeat. Bingyao, the holy maiden of the demonic sect. The villainess despised by the entire world. The woman he once thought too cruel, too extreme. And now, his only lifeline. Lu Chen slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if forcing himself to accept reality. When he opened them again, his gaze had completely changed. Gone was the confusion of someone who had just awakened, replaced instead by the calm of someone who had already seen the future. Fate had cast him to the very bottom. Then he would climb up from there, step by step, without hesitation, without retreat, even if he had to exploit others, even if he had to walk in the shadows, even if he had to become someone despised by the heavenly Tao, he would live. And if this world needed someone to ensure that the villainess would no longer meet a tragic end, then he would become that person. Lu Chen stood silently by the window for a long time. Sunlight slanted across his pale face, highlighting features that still felt unfamiliar to him. In the crooked bronze mirror hanging on the wall, a thin young man was reflected, his complexion sickly pale, his eyes sunken from illness and prolonged pressure. It was the face of the original host, and from this moment on, it was the face he would have to carry, whether he liked it or not. Lu Chen curled his lips slightly, a faint smile so thin it was almost non-existent. In a low voice, hoarse, yet steady, he murmured, "So, I'm still alive." It wasn't a statement to confirm his existence, but more like a reminder to himself. From this moment onward, he no longer had the luxury of carelessness. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor, neither hurried nor slow, but carrying a cold indifference, as if the person outside held no expectations for the one within. There were 2 perfunctory knocks on the door. Then a young woman's voice sounded, flat and mechanical, as though reciting a duty. "Young master, the elder has summoned you. You are to go to the main hall immediately." Lu Chen could clearly hear it. There was not a trace of concern in her tone, only a distance that had long since become habitual. He turned his head, looking at the closed door, and asked in a low voice, "What is it?" There was a brief pause outside before the woman replied, "People from the righteous path have arrived." Just 4 short words, yet they were enough to make the air in the room seem to freeze. Lu Chen didn't need to ask any further. In his mind, every scene had already been neatly arranged. Like a play about to raise its curtain, he slowly took a breath, steadied his breathing, and replied, "I understand." When the door opened, the maid standing outside lowered her head, not daring to look at him directly. She paused slightly when Lu Chen's gaze swept past her. It was no longer the vacant, weak look he once had, but a strangely calm one, like someone who already knew the ending and therefore no longer feared it. Instinctively, the maid stepped aside. A vague sense of unease rose in her heart, but she didn't dare say anything. Lu Chen stepped out of the room. Each step was somewhat heavy, yet completely without hesitation. He knew that from the moment he walked out, the game had already begun. The path leading to the Lu family's main hall was not long, but today it felt as though he were walking on a taut rope. One misstep, and he would fall into the abyss. Along the way, the gazes of those in the family swept over him, their curiosity and contempt undisguised. Some sneered softly, some shook their heads, while others turned away outright, as if afraid of being associated with someone about to become a laughingstock. Fragments of whispers drifted into his ears. "Still dares to show his face? I heard they've come to break off the engagement. What a disgrace to the Lu family." Lu Chen did not react, nor did he show any anger. He simply continued walking in silence, his mind calculating without pause. At this point in the original story, the former host had flown into a rage, shouted hysterically, and personally pushed himself toward his own demise. But not him. He didn't need the pity of these people, nor did he care for their hollow sense of honor. What he needed was survival. And to survive, he had to let them look down on him a little more. As Lu Chen stepped into the main hall, the atmosphere immediately pressed down like a heavy stone. On the main seats, several elders sat upright, their expressions stern, yet unable to conceal the trace of awkwardness in their eyes. Opposite them stood a group dressed in the robes of the righteous path, composed, dignified, their backs straight as swords, their gazes sweeping across the hall with cold assessment. At the center stood a young woman in a pure white dress. Her features were delicate, her lips slightly curved as if smiling, yet there was not a hint of warmth in her eyes. With just a single glance, Lu Chen recognized her. Lan Ruoshui, the female protagonist of this world, the one favored by the heavenly Tao, and also the person who would indirectly push him toward death if he failed to change his fate. When Lan Ruoshui saw him enter, her eyes flickered for a brief moment before she quickly concealed it. Her gentle voice rang out before anyone else could speak. "Young Master Lu, it's been a long time." That polite form of address drew faint smiles from several people in the hall. Everyone understood that after today, the title, Young Master, would hold no meaning for him anymore. Lu Chen stopped at the center of the hall. He clasped his hands and bowed with proper etiquette, his voice calm and even. "Miss Lan." Just two simple words, neither familiar nor resentful, and certainly without the infatuation the original host had once shown. Lan Ruoshui paused slightly, seemingly unaccustomed to this attitude, but quickly regained her composure and turned to an elder of the righteous path beside her. The elder cleared his throat and looked directly at Lu Chen. His voice was steady, yet each word was as sharp as a blade. "We have come today to resolve the engagement between the Lu family and the Lan family. After discussion, both parties agree that the match is no longer suitable. Therefore, the engagement shall be annulled." As soon as his words fell, the hall fell silent for a brief moment, only to be quickly broken by whispers and murmurs. A sheet of paper was placed on the table, pristine and white, lying there like a verdict beyond dispute. In the original story, this was the moment Lu Chen would explode in anger, the moment he would shout and demand an explanation, the moment he would personally sever his own path of retreat. But now, Lu Chen simply stood there, looking at the annulment document, and let out a soft laugh. The sound wasn't loud, yet it was enough to draw every gaze in the hall toward him. An elder from the clan frowned and scolded in a low voice. "Lu Chen, what are you laughing at?" Lu Chen raised his head. His gaze was so calm that it made others uneasy. He replied evenly, "I was just thinking, so it has finally come to this." That answer stunned quite a few people. Even Lan Ruoshui couldn't hide her surprise. Without waiting for anyone to speak, Lu Chen took a step forward and looked directly at her, speaking slowly. This engagement was, from the beginning, for the benefit of both families. Now that Miss Lan has found a better choice, I, Lu Chen, will not hold on to it. With that, he reached out, picked up the annulment document, and without the slightest hesitation, set it aside. That single action plunged the entire hall into silence. Because no one had expected someone deemed worthless to remain so composed.